Welcome back to the Minecraft tutorial series where I teach you how to make Minecraft mods without any coding. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can use procedures to add functionality to your items that you've made. We're going to be talking about how to make a block that can launch you up into the air, how to make endermites come out of dispensers when there's ender pearls inside of them, and also how we can become immune to endermen attacking us by wearing a full set of the Endmium Armor we created previously. Alright, so jumping right into this, I've already made blocks for the ender launcher and the ender extractor. These are just super basic blocks. I gave each of them a recipe. So the ender launcher is made by putting an ender pearl on top of a piston, and then the extractor is made with this sort of pattern. But then other than that, everything about them is just a basic block. Of course, these textures are, as always, available in the description in the Google Drive link if you want to use my textures, but honestly, I'm not that much of an artist, so you might want to make your own. But I've skipped over this because at this point, I'm assuming you're pretty much an expert at making basic blocks. If you're not, this might be a good time to head back to episode 2 and review. So the first thing I'd like to explain is the procedure system, and this is probably the most important system in MCreator that lets you make your blocks, your items, your mobs actually do something. And the first thing that you need to know about is triggers, and we've been seeing them as we've been creating our blocks and items. So if we go into the ender launcher here and click on the triggers tab, you'll see all of these things here that can trigger procedures whenever they happen. And procedures are just like lists of actions that Minecraft will take in order to do a certain thing. This is effectively the closest that we're going to come to programming in this series, although it is just block coding, so it's not that scary. But for this ender launcher, as I demonstrated, I want to make it so that when you walk on it, it'll launch you up into the air. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to this when entity walks on the block right here, and we can just click this plus button to create a new procedure. And it will give it an automatic name. I'm usually okay with these, so it's just the name of the block, and then when an entity walks on the block, and we'll go ahead and create procedure. And this is the procedures interface. On the left here, we have all of these tabs, which contain different blocks that you can grab out and drag into your procedure. Now there's two different main types of blocks you'll see, and that is these ones here, where you can see they have a little connecting dent on the top and the bottom, and you have ones like these, which are on the side. These top and bottom ones are actions, and when you connect them to this starting block right here, they will run in order. So for example, this block right here, we can double click this to pick a different block. Let's pick, I don't know, our ender planks. And when this procedure runs, it will place this ender planks block at X, Y, and Z. And in this case, X, Y, and Z are the location of the ender launcher block itself. What this means is that when you walk on the ender launcher, it will turn into planks. Obviously, this isn't what we want, but it's a pretty good example of how to get started. Now, these blocks over here that connect can be used to do something only if something else is true. I think a better example for this would be something like is entity burning? This event/target entity corresponds to the entity that walked over top of this block in this case. Let's say we wanted to do something really off the walls and we wanted to set this to the ender planks, but only if something that is burning walks on top of it. Then we can head into this flow control here and we can grab an if block. From here, you'll notice that it goes in order. It has these top and bottom connectors, but also that you can put stuff inside of it and that you can attach something to the side. So let's attach this right here, and let's attach our burning condition to the side here. And now at this point, we can put this block inside of the if block. And what this means is that this right here, and whatever we put inside of the if will only be ran if this condition is true. Otherwise, it skips directly over all of this. If we were to put this block outside, it would run this, do nothing, and then run this no matter what. So anything that you want to happen on this condition, you have to put inside. But let's say we want to make it ender planks if we're burning, and oak planks if we're not burning. Then what we can do is we can click on this little gear here, and we can drag in an else block. And what this will mean is that it will do this top thing if we're burning, and it will do this bottom thing if we're not burning. Basically the opposite of whatever's up here. So we said we wanted to turn this into oak planks, so I'm just going to right click and click on duplicate so we don't have to find it again, and we'll put it down here, and we'll set this to oak planks. Hopefully this makes a fair bit of sense to read. So once again, going from the top, we check if we're burning. If we are burning, we place this block at the position, which will effectively replace our ender launcher. And if we're not burning, then we place the other one. One more thing before we go into adding the actual functionality for this block. What would happen if you wanted to, let's say, not check when we're burning, but instead check if our health is full? Well, you'll notice that there's nothing in here to check if the entity's health is full, but there is a block to get the current health of the entity. At this point, you'll probably notice that these two blocks are different colors. Blue blocks like this mean booleans. That is effectively a yes or a no. This will be yes if you're burning. It will be no if you're not burning. This current health, the purple block, is a number, just like the X, Y, and Z coordinates are numbers. A number is not a yes or no, so we're not able to put it into this if block. It just won't connect. And of course it won't, because saying if a number doesn't really make any sense. A number isn't a yes or no. But what we actually wanted to do was check that our health was full. And you'll notice that there's also a block in here to get the max health. So the way that we can think of this is if our current health is equal to our maximum health, that means that our health is full. And luckily, there's a block just for that. Inside of logic right here, we have this purple equals operator. And you'll notice there's a bunch of different equals ones, but since we're comparing two blocks which are purple, two numbers, we want to grab the purple one. And at this point, we can just put this on the left, put this on the right, and now we have a clear yes or no value. If the current health is equal to the max health, that's a yes. If the current health is not equal to the max health, that's a no. And this can be slotted into our if block. Okay. Hopefully you're still sticking with me here, but one more thing. What if we wanted to check if our health is full and we're burning? Well, that's actually not too bad either, but it is a little tricky to figure out for the first time because it's in a bit of a weird spot. It's actually under logic, and we want to grab the blue equals block, and then click right here and set this to and. This blue block, as you should be able to take from the purple block, will take two yes or no values, and will only be yes itself if both of the input values are yes. That explanation probably sounded pretty complicated, but it does make sense if you think about it. It's if the left is yes and the right is yes. So we'll slot in our current health, and we'll slot in our burning, and there we go. In order to make this a little easier to read, you can right click and click on external inputs, and it just reorganizes it like this. That's just a style thing though, it doesn't actually do anything. So again, if we were to read this, we would be checking if the current health is equal to the maximum health, which means that the health is full, and we're burning. And if both of those things are true, then we would place this block. Otherwise, we would place this block. And the possibilities with this are endless. There's so many different blocks and so many different things that you can do. But of course, the whole setup that we have here doesn't really make a lot of sense. So let's go ahead and delete it, and we're gonna give the Ender Launcher its actual functionality. So to start, I'm gonna come over to Entity Procedures here, and I'm gonna find the one that says Push. And what this will do is it will take this target entity, which is gonna be whatever walks over the block, and it will give it this velocity value, which basically means it will launch the player this much. Now we don't want to change our X and our Z coordinate. This is forward and backward and left and right. So we'll just set this to 0. We want to leave that unchanged. But we want to add a lot of Y velocity, which will mean it will shoot you up in the air. So we can make this, let's say 4. 4 will launch us pretty high. Now this would be good on its own, but the thing is, if you do this, you're going to fall and you're going to die. So I think we should give the player a little bit of slow falling as well. So we'll come over here to Actions, and we will add Potion. We can just choose slow falling right here from the list. Ticks is the number of seconds times 20. So I'm gonna say 400, which is 20 seconds of slow falling. Another thing that you should know is this level here is actually 1 plus the real level. So slow falling 1, you would put 0 here. If you were to put 1 here, you would actually be giving slow falling 2. So I'm just gonna set this to 0. And all that these last two things mean are if you make it ambient, then it won't show up in the top right of your screen with all your potion effects. And then the particles are whether or not you're going to have the little potion particles floating around you. So I'll leave that off as well. And the last thing for a little bit of atmosphere is I wanna play a sound effect. So I'm gonna come to World Procedures and Play Sound right here. When I click on this, it'll bring up a list with all the sounds in the game, and I'm just gonna search for piston. We'll do piston extend. The level here is just the volume. We're gonna leave that at 1. And the pitch is how high or low pitched the sound is. So 1 is the default piston sound. I'm gonna make this a little bit higher pitched. If we set a category here, if players were to turn off this certain category of sounds or change the volume in their options menu, then it would be affected. So I'm gonna set this to block since the sound is coming from a block. This way, if the player were to go into their options menu and turn block sounds to 0 or something like that, then it would mute this sound. And this is about it. So walking through this one at a time, once again, this is going to push the player upwards very fast, give them slow falling, and then play this sound. And this will happen basically all at once, but if it was important, things run from the top to the bottom. Just in this case, they'll be running so quickly that you won't notice any difference. And now that we're all done with this, we can just go ahead and click on Save Mod Element, and it will be automatically added in here to our when entity walks on the block. And at this point, we can just go ahead and click Save Mod Element on the block as well. The next thing I'd like to look at actually ties back into our first episode with item extensions. I think if we put an ender pearl in a dispenser and we shoot the dispenser, it should have a chance of popping out an endermite. So let's come up here and we'll click add, and we'll click on item extension. I'm gonna call this the ender pearl dispenser extension, and create. Remember, the item extension source is the item that it applies to, so I'm just going to choose an ender pearl. Now, we don't want it to be compostable, and we don't want to make it a fuel, so we'll leave these, but we are going to turn on custom dispense behavior. Now, these two right here you might recognize as procedure blocks. This top one here actually isn't. It is a condition, but this is a little bit more complicated, and so I think we'll talk about it when we talk about more advanced procedures in the future. But if we just leave this blank, this will mean that it always dispenses successfully. This procedure here is what happens when we actually dispense it, so I'm just going to add, And we'll leave this name here and create procedure. And now, like we were saying, we want to spawn an endermite. But I actually only want this to happen about 50% of the time. So how can we do that? Well, we're going to bring out our old friend, the if block here. And at this point, the best way to do this is going to be to get a random number. If we think about it this way, if we get a random number between 1 and 2, if the number is 1, that's a 50% chance. So all that we have to do is get a random number and then check that that random number is equal to 1. And luckily, inside of this math tab here, you have just that. Make sure that you're grabbing random integer. An integer is just a number that doesn't have any decimal points. If you were to grab a random number, this could give you like 1.5 or 1.68342118, etc., etc. But random integer will only give us full whole numbers, and then we can just set the maximum to 2. And this will mean that every time this runs, we will get either 1 or we will get 2, and each of those have an equal likelihood of happening. If we wanted to make this, let's say, a 25% chance, we could make this a 4. This would mean that every time you run it, you could get either 1, 2, 3, or a 4. And then if we're still checking that it's equal to 1, then there's a 1 in 4 chance that this number will be equal to 1. I'm just going to put this back at 2. And at this point, you should be able to figure out how to get this to go into the if block. We're just going to grab our equals block. And this time, we don't want to check that this is equal to something else. We want to check that this is just equal to 1. And inside of math here, there is a plain number block right here. So we'll grab that out and we'll set this to 1. Let's slot that in here. And then once again, this is going to get a random number between 1 and 2. If that random number is 1, which will happen exactly half of the time, then we'll run whatever is inside of here. Otherwise, we'll skip it. And all that we want to do in this case is spawn an endermite. That's under world procedures and actions and spawn entity right here. So we'll choose the endermite. And you might think that we're good to go. This will spawn an endermite at the dispense position. But this actually isn't the dispense position. This is the position of the dispenser. If we were to leave it like this, it would spawn the endermite inside of the dispenser and it would probably suffocate to death right away. But this creates a bit of a conundrum because dispensers can face any way. So we wouldn't want to exactly say, like, y+1, for example, which would spawn it on top of the dispenser, because if the dispenser's facing forward, then that would be weird. But luckily, there is actually a way to get the direction that the dispenser is facing, and that's just under direction procedures right here. We have the X, Y, and the Z offset. So I'm going to grab out each one of these here. To explain this as simply as possible, let's say the dispenser is facing up. The X and the Z will both be 0, and the Y will be 1. If it's facing down, the Y would be -1. It just corresponds to Minecraft coordinates. So let's say the dispenser was facing in the positive X direction, then this X would be 1. And so all we're going to do now is we're going to take the position of the dispenser, and we're going to add it to each of these offsets. So inside of math here, there is an addition block right here. Remember, you can click on this drop down and get a whole bunch of different math operations, but we're going to just use addition here, and I'm going to get 3 of them. One is for our X, so we'll take X plus the X offset. One is for Y, so we'll take a Y plus the Y offset. And one is for Z, so we'll take Z plus the Z offset. And we can just pop that back into our block. Once again, you might want to right click and go external inputs just to make this easier to read. And to run through this again from the top, just to make sure it hopefully makes as much sense as possible, we are going to be checking if this random number, 1 or 2, is equal to 1, which will be a 50% chance. If that 50% chance happens, then we will spawn an endermite at the position of the dispenser plus the way that it's facing. And so we're all done with this one. So we'll click save, make sure that it's set properly under our procedure block right here, and go ahead and save this as well. And there's one more procedure thing that I want to show you today. I would like to make it so that if we are wearing a full set of Endmium armor, Endermen will no longer attack us. So firstly, how do we detect that we're wearing a full set of armor? Well, if we go into the armor here and we go to triggers, there are events that will happen whenever we're wearing each piece of armor. And what we can actually do is we can just apply our procedure to one of them. Like let's say the helmet tick event. This will run on each tick that you're wearing the helmet, which is 20 times per second. If we're wearing the full set of armor, we must be wearing the helmet, so there's no way that this wouldn't trigger. And then we can use our if statements to just make sure that we're also wearing every single other piece of armor. So let's get started by just adding one to our helmet tick event here. Create procedure. And like I said, the first thing that I'd like to do is make sure that we're wearing the other armor pieces and not just the helmet. So to do that, we'll put in our if block, and under entity procedures and data, there is a block which gets the item from a given armor slot. Now for this slot number here, 0 corresponds to boots, 1 is leggings, 2 is chestplate, and 3 is helmet. And so in this case, we want to check that the item in slot 0 is equal to our boots. We also want to check that the item in slot 1 is equal to our leggings, and that the item in slot 2 is equal to our chestplate. There's no need to check for the helmet because we know that this will only be activating anyway whenever we're wearing the helmet. So under logic here, there is a equals block for our items, so we'll drag that out. And if we come to Minecraft components here, we can grab a blank item slot. And once again, we're just going to set this here to be the boots, this one to be the leggings, and this one to be the chest plate. So this here will check that the item in our boot slot is our Endmium boots. This one will check that the item in our legging slot is our Endmium leggings, and this one will check that the item in our chest plate slot is the Endmium chest plate. And we only want this to continue if all three of these things are true, which means we can grab out our old friend, the AND block here. And in order to check for three things, we can actually just put an AND block inside of an AND block. And you'll see that now we have three different slots. I'll just set these both to external inputs again so it looks a little bit better. And we can slot these in right here. Once again, if we think about this logically, we can collapse each of these AND blocks into a yes or a no statement. So this one is only yes if the item in the boot slot is boots. And then this block right here is only yes if both of these things are also yes, which means that in order for this final block here to be yes, this has to be yes, and this has to be yes. And for this to be yes, this has to be yes, and this has to be yes. Hopefully everyone kind of understands that, so I'm just gonna plop this in here. And now we know that we are able to check if we're wearing a full set of armor, but now how do we stop Enderman from getting aggressive? Honestly, this solution kind of sucks, but it does work and it's the best thing that I can think of to do with this procedure system. So we're gonna come to world procedures here and actions, and we are going to grab this one right here. For each entity as entity iterator at this position in square cube with size 4. What the heck does this mean? Well, it means that everything inside of this block here will be run for every single entity within a radius of 4 of the player. This means that if we were to have, let's say, a pig and a sheep within 4 blocks of the player, everything in here would be run twice. And we can actually access the current entity using this entity iterator right here. Stick with me here. So I'm gonna go if, and we wanna check that this is an Enderman so that we're only making Endermen not aggressive. Luckily, there's a way to check if this is an Enderman. It's just under logic here. And if we scroll down, this is event target entity a subtype of, and we'll just set this here to an Enderman. So this block will be yes if this entity is a subtype of Enderman. Let's plop this in here, but we've actually created a bug. In doing this, we're actually referencing the event target entity, which is going to be the entity that's wearing the full set of armor. In other words, the player. But the player is never going to be a subtype of Enderman, so this isn't going to work. What we should be accessing is this entity iterator right here. So I'm just going to swap this out. Remember that this entity iterator here will at some point be every single entity within a 4-block cube of the player. So once again, let's say we were to have a pig, a sheep, and an Enderman within this cube around the player. The first time this would run, it would check if this entity, which is the sheep, is this type of Enderman, and it would say no, so it would skip this. Then it would check if the pig is a type of Enderman, and it would say no, so it would skip this. And then it would check if the Enderman is a type of Enderman, which it is, so it would do everything inside of here. And what we want to do is set this entity, the entity iterator, to be non-aggressive. And that is under entity procedures and actions. We can see right here, set the attack target of one entity to another entity. So let's grab this in here. Remember to replace this entity, the one whose attack target we're setting. We're going to replace that with the entity iterator. And what entity do we want it to attack? Well, we don't want it to attack anything. And in order to set this to nothing, it's actually under advanced. We're just going to grab this no entity right here. Get rid of source entity and pop that in. And this should be us all done, but let's run through this step by step once again. So first, this whole thing up here just checks that we're wearing a full set of armor, not just the helmet. Because remember, this will be run 20 times per second while we're wearing the helmet. Then, assuming we are wearing all of the other armor pieces as well, we are going to loop through every entity within 4 blocks of the player. If that entity is a type of Enderman, we are just going to make sure that it doesn't attack anything. We're going to stop it from attacking the player and just make it attack nothing. And that is us all done here. So I'm just going to go ahead and save mod element. Make sure that it's set under our helmet tick, and we will save this as well. Alright, well hopefully no one's brain is exploding, because next episode it's going to get a lot worse, and that's actually going to be everything today, so let's just go ahead and test it out. So here we are back in the testing world, and the first thing that I'd like to test is that Enderman will no longer attack us while we're wearing this armor. So I'm just going to grab my Enderman spawn egg, and put one down, and now, we'll notice if I attack him, he will no longer attack me. Note that he is still very mad at me though, and if I take off this armor, he's going to instantly start to come after me. But if I put it back on, he'll stop attacking me. The next thing to test is going to be the launcher. So I'll just grab that here, slap it down, and when we stand on it, there we go. We've been launched up into the air. And you'll notice that we have slow falling. We're actually falling slowly down so we won't die when we hit the ground. The original idea for the Ender launcher was that you could actually put it down in the end and use it to climb these towers, which I think works very, very well for this. But also, I totally admit they would have a lot of other cool uses as well. And finally, the Endermites in dispensers. Plop down a dispenser, put some Ender pearls inside, and when we trigger it, there we go, it spawned an Endermite. And that time it didn't. And that time it did, and I'm getting attacked. And that time it didn't. And that time it did. There we go. And also, since we added the offset, it does respect the direction that the dispenser's facing in. So if we put it upwards, put in our pearls, everything that spawns on top of it now. And so that's actually going to be it for today. Hopefully you guys learned a lot about how to make procedures and how to add functionality to your own items. In the next one, we're going to be creating an ender extractor, which will extract items from endstone. Stuff like ender pearls and ender pearl fragments and tons of cool stuff. We're also going to be using more procedures in order to give that functionality, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. Remember, do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe so that you don't miss the next video, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye. Oh my god. I stepped on the jumper. Oopie daisy.